Hi, everyone. It's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. This week's Rutgers Rant is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. A big thank you to our sponsor and to all of our listeners for the continued support. Now let's get to the show.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights. With your host, Steve Politi, and Rutgers insiders Keith Sargent and James Cratch. Let's start shopping.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rutgers Rant. Steve Politi here, joined by my friends Keith Sargent, James Cratch. Fellas, how's your summer going? We haven't done this in a while. What's going on? Good vacations?
I would say I missed you, but between vacations, I can't really say that. I mean, it is nice to see your Cratch has a beard. I know this is an audio, a non-visual podcast, but Cratch is growing the beard. I'm hoping that he brings it to Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Day.
He's got quite a beard too, Cratch. I mean, that's not just a little bit of growth there. I mean, you've got full, mountain man here.
Hey, believe me, I'm as surprised as anyone. I really didn't think I had it in me, but I just let it keep going, and here we are. So yes, I will get it trimmed up, be ready to rock and roll Media Day, putting my ties out for people to vote on Twitter. We're back to normal, boys.
This is it. Oh my gosh. And two of you are going to Indianapolis to get St. Elmo's without me. It's kind of, it really is sort of tragic that this could possibly hasn't happened. But hey, I wish you the best. Sarge, you gonna order the calamari again?
What did I say coming back from the NCAA tournament after we spent like 2.5 weeks almost straight in Indianapolis? If I don't, and now all of a sudden, 3 months later, I'm back to Indianapolis. So I just,
Not only are you back, but this could be the first of 3 trips because Rutgers is playing at Indiana this year, so we're going to fly to Indianapolis and stay in Indianapolis before driving to Bloomington. And then the Rutgers-Illinois game, technically, I was looking at the maps.
It's closer, yeah.
Indianapolis is closer to Champaign than Chicago, and we're going to have been in Chicago 2 weeks prior for the Northwestern game. Yep. So I'm thinking maybe we switch it up. We fly to
St. Elmo's.
On Friday night, go to Champaign on a Saturday, drive back.
I'm not going to the Illinois game. Okay. Illinois game, yeah, that's a road. That's a road.
Art Sikowski,
you guys got
reunion.
You guys have got that
sidebar.
Covered. I watched a lot of games on TV last year. Might be another one we can watch on TV this year. All right, so let's dive in. We've had a lot of stuff going on, right? I mean, it's been summer. It's supposed to be the slow season, but we haven't done one of these in a couple months. And, there have been some significant developments. And I think first and foremost, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the recruiting juggernaut that the Scarlet Knights have become. Fellas, it's pretty extraordinary to watch. Now you've got this kid, the linebacker out of New York, Moses Walker, 4-star, best player in the state of New York. Not only does he commit to Rutgers, but he trolls Penn State in the process. I mean, this kid's already he's already a legend in Piscataway before he gets here. Cratch, what do you make of that?
Well, what I made of that was I would imagine that was got to be a strange conflicting emotion thing for Greg Schiano. It's a huge recruiting win. It's like, hey, Greg, here's the phone. He put it out there. He did what? He trolled Penn State and tagged James Franklin. I would assume that I don't know if you do it that night, but I assume at some point Greg's going to probably pull young Moses aside and be like, hey, let's not do that again.
No, yeah, that's like the Jeremy Ito finger point. That's something that kid's going to be talked about, right? Yeah. But overall, I mean, the third number one recruit from a state, New Jersey and Kentucky. Of course, Kentucky, that's always been the hotbed of Rutgers recruiting. Now, for a while they're a better class than Alabama. I guess that's changed, but still 12th rated class. I mean, Sarge, when you look at this now, what do you get the sense here is responsible for this sudden surge?
I think chiefly, Greg Schiano is good at recruiting. I think we've known that for a long time. I think he's gotten better through the years, and I think, he's really good. He has, what we all thought was a top flight staff, especially from a recruiting standpoint. I think they've lived up to the billing. I think those two factors are major. And look, I mean, when it comes to what the past year has been like, as far as not being able to take all these visits, I think Greg Schiano took advantage of it in some weird way that he was able to sell the program based on his vision and based on some of the other things that he's talked about. I think it was able to take advantage of the pandemic during a period where, recruiting was unlike it's ever been.
Craig, you had a good analysis on the website the other day just about where this class is going to finish. I largely don't think it matters at this point. I mean,
I tend to agree a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the players that they want to be getting. They're going to probably be in the top 20-ish range. It's all about momentum, and I think the perception out there obviously is that they've got a lot of momentum going. But you came up with where the basic range is going to be, and I think it's still pretty impressive.
No doubt. I think that there's a shot to finish in the top 15. I think if he did, it'd probably be at 15th. I think definitely top 20s on the board. I mean, the big number, I think, if you think the ranking is important, I do think it's important in this aspect. You'd like to get to 22 or higher because that would be the best class in school history. That would beat the 2012 class that Greg kind of had and then handed off to Kyle Flood at the end. So I think that's a number they probably would like to get. Anything beyond that would be gravy. But to answer your question, I think another big impact is, and I think what Sarge said about the weird recruiting calendar is that recruits want to be with other recruits. And I think in the sense, it's kind of a snowball effect. Once you get the first guy or three guys, then everyone else wants to jump on board. And I have to think it helped Rutgers that you had all these kids who committed, who had never been to campus, who just knew the coaches and the sports staff through Zoom. And they all get together once the world finally opens up and the NCAA allows recruiting. And that must have been great that, usually it's one guy shows up. And now it's 10 of them in a room, sitting with the throne, posing in their jerseys. I just have to imagine that snowball, hey, we're in the club now, let's all be together, helps the recruiting efforts.
The other underrated thing, and I agree with that totally, I also think that this is what Greg Schiano's finally recruiting without, the long list of things that other schools could use against Rutgers, conference for a while, facilities for a while, assistant coach retention for a while, campus for a while. You can rattle off the list of things. So when he did that 12, looking back in that 2012 class, just with a lot of obstacles, he managed to get a pretty impressive class. Now he's doing it without having to worry about all that. And I think the momentum from last season, even though it was 3 wins, I think clearly, people are buying into what he's doing. So you got to give him a lot of credit. All right. So the other big significant development of the past few months, it was a basketball recruiting coup. There wasn't any newcomers, but the two most significant players for the Scarlet Knights who are still on the fence. I guess we thought they were coming back, but now they're officially coming back. Geo Baker, Harper Jr. will be on the team next year. Obviously there's a lot of concern in the fan base about the basketball program. I get it, but now you're getting, two of the better players, two better perimeter players in the league back for that team next year, Cratch. And they finally added Ralph Agee, the transfers from San Jose. So they have the backup big man. Overall, are you feeling better about the basketball program, or should fans still be a little worried?
I think overall you have to be kind of impressed by the way that Steve Peichel kind of held the line. I mean, think about all the transfer portal mayhem and the NBA draft mayhem, and you thought everybody was leaving. And then we get to this point where if you look at it, I think in hindsight, Mamadou Ducor, Montez Mathis, their transfers, pretty predictable, pretty normal, happens all the time in college basketball. I think everyone kind of knew Miles Johnson had bigger aspirations than hoops, and those academic aspirations would probably pull him back to the West Coast at some point. I don't think anyone thought Jacob Young was going to be back for another year. I think the surprise there is that he's at another college rather than playing professionally. But other than that, I mean, they didn't have a shock transfer. They didn't lose a guy like Cliff or Mulcahy. They get Geo back. They get Ron back with relative ease. They add a big man. They add some other pieces. This is a team that, I don't know if they're a surefire tournament team, but they're definitely going to be in the hunt competitive into January and February, which I think is very important for Rutgers basketball. You got over the hump. They really did. I don't think that they could afford necessarily a slide back into sub 500. I think you'd lose some of those, kind of bandwagon fans and the buzz around the program. As long as they're contending for March, I think they're going to continue to build.
And the roster, Sarge, it's not as bad as people are concerned about. I mean, still, there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of talent that we haven't seen yet. I mean, you've got some guys in the program who are going to be coming off this bench who are going to have bigger roles that I think, that we've talked about before on the show that I think are going to be, they're going to surprise some people. and you're kind of betting on Steve Pikiell to coach him up. I mean, one thing we've kind of learned about him is he is a good developer of talent. I mean, it's the one thing he said from the very first day he was on this campus was he was going to identify guys, and this was going to be a development program, and they weren't always going to win the biggest recruits, but they were going to bring guys through. Now you got to see if he's got that ability to find the next role player, to find the guy who can step in and play 15 to 18 minutes a game.
Yeah, so I did talk to Steve Pikiell about a week and a half ago just to kind of check his temperature on different things, and I got some news for you guys. I mean, Steve Pikiell's telling people that this is going to be his best team yet. So, this is year 6, and they're coming off back-to-back NCAA tournament appearances. 2 years ago, where he counts it, so we might as well join the parade and count it as well. But certainly, as a bold statement, he thinks that this is going to be his best team. The one guy I think that he's really, really high on as far as newcomers is Andre Hyatt. As he points out, this is a guy who had a double-double in the NCAA tournament this past year. He fits. He seems like he's going to be a multi-positional guy that the type of guy that Steve Pikiell loves in his program. He's really high on the development of some of the guys who didn't play. He really thinks that the Ron Harper and Geo Baker coming back, both of them are poised to have bigger years. And I think Cliff, is another guy who he expects to have a major leap. Paul Mulcahy, on and on and on. Kale McConnell, he said, this is the first offseason that he hasn't been, injured, and he looks great. So, again, if Steve Pikiell thinks this is going to be his best team, I think, I tend to believe him. You look at the roster, I don't see any reason why they can't be, start the season in the top 25.
Wow. How about that, Sarge? Bold, top 25. You agree with that, Cratch? Top 25 to start the season?
I don't know if they'll get there. I mean, I think they would probably have to have there have to be a big time Rutgers campaign, because a lot of that is kind of baked in, very early on in the off season. But no, I mean, I think they could definitely get there this season without a doubt. I mean, the question I gotta have about this team is we've looked at the non-conference schedule. Thank goodness the Seton Hall game got scheduled. Cooler heads prevailed, but there's a lot of cupcakes on this thing. I know Rutgers is going to say they're not cupcakes, but they're going to have a chance to build a pretty gaudy record in a non-conference play. And then I think it's going to be, okay, what do they do in the Big Ten? So I think there's a very good chance we don't really know a whole heck of a lot about this team until we get to January and they're in the heart of conference play.
Right, and we're forgetting that they're also adding one of the most significant parts of the program was the RAC will be back. And I think that's important. To get your vaccination cards, folks. Get into the building. That's going to be a big deal for them to have that place filled. They didn't have it last year. They weren't as good at home. So, I mean, yeah, when you look at that, that's another reason to think that the overreaction about the sky falling might have been really overdone. All right.
One last thing. I think I'm going ahead. I think we were going to go to questions later, but I've always been surprised by how people get so down on the recruiting of Steve Pikiell. Like, he's brought in 8 of the top 20 recruits in the history of the program.
Completely agree.
The most iconic player of the last decade he found in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire. Yep. It's just I just don't get it.
Especially since the biggest recruits Rutgers that have ever gotten have never panned out. Mike Rosario transfer, Dante. I mean, the ones who did, the ones who did come.
Well, look, I get it's kind of a what have you done for me now thing, and now you have Shiano's success to compare him to as opposed to Ash.
No, it's
people act like he's out there getting beating out Elon for kids. No, he's bringing in legitimate basketball players.
People get wrapped up in the opinions of people who are these so-called recruiting experts and rank them. Steve Pikiell's not the type of guy who's going to get these sexy. He doesn't look at that. He looks at guys who fit the program. Most of the guys who he recruits, he's been on for a while, and he looks at guys that can play multiple positions, and he has a certain eye for what he wants. And sometimes they're not the sexy top 100 kids, but a lot the majority of them, like Steve said, have really panned out.
Right, and he made a decision. He wasn't going to dive in and just go wholesale, make promises to these players in the transfer portal and completely change the roster. I respect it to a degree. He's built this program the way he wants to build it. He's got guys who are waiting in the wings who've commanded some playing time. So look, he added a couple of pieces that he needed to, and they're going to get significant minutes. But yeah, now we can see if we're going to find out if he has built one good team, or if he's built a good program. And I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest he's built a good program. All right, the third most important thing that's happened in the month of July, NIL rights, Sarge. Finally, basketball players, athletes making a little money and making a little cash on the side, striking deals with other podcasts, by the way. We're the only podcast yet to, I feel like we haven't hired anybody.
We haven't sold out. We have ethics that, we don't believe in. No, that's not it. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough money. Steve Politi, our host, it just makes too much money. I think.
And that must be it. Yeah. Well, also we've done the technology thing. Can you imagine us? It's hard enough for the three of us to get on this. If we added another person on this. Yeah. I mean, it would be a complete. Good grief, I don't think there's room in Cratch's closet for
no
03 to sit there and do an interview.
I will say that, like, on July 1st, there was like a 5-minute period where I was like, maybe I should just call Corsac and be like, hey, I'll give you $50. Tweet that you should read my stuff.
That's good. You should have done it. I was gonna do the same thing. If I could get Geo Baker to do, what do they call when they do the messages on the the cameo? They get him to do a cameo saying that I'm good enough to win the Pulitzer Prize and put that out there. Maybe it might have impacted it. This is out there and available for you to do. It is interesting to see how the athletes are really capitalizing it on interesting ways. There hasn't been one big, here's a lot of money going to so and so, but you can see guys are T-shirts and podcast appearances and Kratz. There's a lot of interesting things.
There are. I will say this. I do feel like the NIL era so far has had a big ready, fire, aim energy. And I think 95% of the athletes and 95% of the people we're paying them, they have no idea what anything's worth or what is good or what's up or what's down. It's like, hey, should we give this football player $10,000 at Texas A&M to do an exclusive interview with this fan website? That sounds pretty good. Now, I don't know if that $10,000 is actually going to help out a business in any way. If it's just you want to give a really good football player free money, that's as effective a way as anything. But no, I think that we're going to look back on this by the end of the year, definitely 5-10 years from now, and be like, how did we spend all that time worrying about this and wringing our hands about this and talking about this? Because it's really not that big of a deal.
You agree, Sarge?
Absolutely, especially to the latter point. This is long overdue. We all get that. Kudos, to Geo Baker. He led the charge. He really did. Yeah. He really. We have to say that right off the bat. The guy. I honestly, and this is going to deviate off the point, but your juice list just came
Number
out today.
14 on the juice.
14. I thought that was low. I thought it was low. Yeah, it was 10 last year. So he had a better year. I thought he should have been in the top 10. So, look, Gio's doing just fine. Like you said, some of the endorsements, I don't think he's going to be, whining about the juice list. But, certainly, some of these guys, we've talked about some of the Olympic sport athletes that how much are some of these, athletes going to be worth when you look at some of their Instagram followings and just their ability to actually host camps, all around the state, back home. This is obviously long overdue, and I think they're right now. Cratch is right; they're scratching at the surface of what their potential, marketability might be right now.
I was going to save this for after True and False, but let's do it right now. Let's do this is something that my favorite podcast, the Yahoo College Football Podcast with Dan Wetzel, Pete Thamel, and Pat Forty did. If you were to draft your NIL right Rutgers team.
Yep.
Who would be the athlete in the history of recent history of Rutgers that we would pick
recent
first?
History. So anyone.
I don't think Paul Robeson was going to get a lot of money for selling train tickets or whatever.
But I mean, Paul Robeson, 4 different sports. I mean,
so you think he could have gotten a good deal for
yes.
But
I think back then, I don't think there was really rules.
Magic powders. What would they be?
He might have been cashing in for all we know. He might have been ineligible by the NCAA if they ever did some investigation.
Yeah, geez, they don't encourage them. Who wants to go first? Who's your first pick? You get the first pick, Sarge. Who is your first out of all the athletes in the history of Rutgers for NIL rights? Who do you got?
Yep, I'm gonna take the layup. I'm gonna say Ray Rice. I mean, he came at a time when that program was starving. I mean, he was a Heisman Trophy candidate, a legit one. I think he finished 7th or 8th that year, but 2,000 yards that year. He was the first real true superstar during that era of Rutgers football. I'm going to take the layup. It's Ray Rice.
All right, Cratch, who's yours?
All right, so I'm actually going to fire a little bit of a curveball here, and there's some logic behind it. I'm going to take Todd Frazier, just because everyone knows him. When he gets to Rutgers, he's a superstar, the Little League World Series team. But a guy like Todd Frazier could have literally run hitting instructions out of some warehouse in East Brunswick on the side and just racked up cash. Like, parents probably would, like, in this hyper, it was right at that time where, like, sports specialization and year-round playing everything. Todd Frazier could have literally sit there in a batting cage and just look at a kid swing and tell him, hey, move your hands up, do this, this, and this. And people probably would have paid him $150, $200 when he was in college. And then bring the next kid in, all summer camps and everything. I would say Todd Frazier probably had a lot of NIL impact, and he was on a really good Rutgers baseball team that won.
That's a good one. Yeah, I think I'm going to throw this one out there. Same team as Sarge, but if I had to pick one player off that team, it would have been Brian Leonard, not Ray Rice, because Brian Leonard came around a little earlier. He had a big fan. Fans just loved him. I just could see him being the kind of guy who could have, put his smiling face on a car dealership on Route 109 or something like that. We haven't named anybody in basketball. If we're looking at recent players, Quincy Dube.
Oh, sure. Quincy Dube, for sure. I mean, he the likelihood of him coming back, had he been able to do that, because he was on the fence as far as, the likelihood of him coming back, that would have been a complete game changer for sure. Carly Lloyd, I mean, let's, she was, not only has she had an incredible legacy, like you wrote about the other day, a couple weeks ago, the potential, maybe the greatest, women's soccer player of all time, post Rutgers, but she was really good, during her 2004 Big East midfielder of the year, two-time All-American. I mean, she was really, really good, in a sport. Like I said, I think, look, I mean, there was no Instagram back then. I mean, your marketability might have been diminished a little bit, but let's face it. I mean, she would have been able to cash in on camps, and she would have had been able to be marketable for sure.
All right, good stuff. Fun discussion. Let's dive into true and false now, fellas. We haven't done this in a while. I'm sure you still know the rules. I'll give you a statement. You tell me if it is true or false. True or false? Rutgers will lose at least one of its 6 4-star recruits before signing day. Cratch, true or false?
I'm going to say false.
All right. Sarge?
False.
Wow, okay. You've got good confidence in it. I'm not going to sound the alarm, so I'm going to say true just because it's the nature of the beast, but we'll come back to that. True or false? Cratch, if a team has a COVID outbreak during the Big Ten season, it should have to forfeit the game. True or false?
True.
Sarge?
God, I hate when we keep on agreeing, but true.
I have to say true, but it's an interesting dilemma, because I just wonder what's going to happen when you have the lopsided scheduling and you're looking at Big Ten championship game potentials. But I can see what you're saying. All right, true or false? A former Rutgers athlete will win an Olympic gold medal. Crash, true or false?
True.
Sarge?
True.
Yeah, I guess you're assuming it's Carly Lloyd, or are you assuming it is hammer thrower Rudy Winkler.
Rudy Winkler. No, I don't think he's on that level. But
Well, come on, yes, he is. He's fourth. I look at this. Like, believe me, don't unnerd me on the stupid Olympic numbers here. I think he's fourth in the country.
First in the country, though.
Fourth in the world. I'm sorry, fourth in the world. Yeah,
in the world. Okay, I stand corrected. And
that's
then
a possibility.
Real quick though,
gold medal though, fourth. Don't you have to be first?
But they throw the thing. Sometimes it goes further than other times, from what I understand, from what I've seen.
Real quick though, Steve. Obviously, you're not in Tokyo. Like, the headlines, it's almost like every day, like the Japanese government is like, okay, what can we do now that really will convince them to call this off? Like, I looked at the headlines this morning. It's like the athletes can't have sex in the beds. There's too many oysters in the bay threatening the rowing thing.
They need to have the bed to have sex in there. Come on, that's the crazy part. They're athletes. They don't need a bed.
There's a sewage break in the triathlon course.
I saw that.
Like, you can't go in the subway. You can't talk to people. You can't have alcohol.
That was the big one for me. I knew, like, I was like, still, gosh, I wish I were going. And I saw, like, they're not going to sell alcohol in the restaurants. And thank God I'm not in Tokyo. My goodness, what a miserable thing.
It's going to be like, we lost the pommel horses for the gymnastics. So we're going to have to, like, it's just amazing. It's like,
yeah.
Like, I'm reading this, like, the torchbearer, like, Ralph Lauren had to basically create, like, this, like, self-cooling suit for the torchbearer, the flag bearers to wear at the opening ceremony because it's 90 degrees.
90 degrees. It's just, miserable. Can't eat in the restaurants. Can't get a good thing of sushi. Can't do karaoke. I mean, like, what are we doing?
Baseball, like, we got all the Rutgers guys that, hey, we this field, like, the first base line is going to be 78 feet, guys. Like, that's what we got, like. Oh my goodness!
That's outstanding. All right, good little diversion. Hey, Rutgers Rant listeners, it's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. We appreciate you supporting this podcast and the sponsors who help us continue doing it. This week's podcast is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. If you listen to this show, you love Rutgers, and if you love Rutgers, you know the positive impact that DevCo has made on the campus and its community. We thank the New Brunswick Development Corporation for its continued support and for helping make this podcast possible. Now back to the show. All right, and finally, true or false? This is a multi-parter, as you can guess. The most important player on the Rutgers football team heading into the 2021 season is Bo Melton. True or false? Cratch.
False.
Sarge.
False.
All right, I'm going to go false. 03. True or false? Cratch.
False.
Sarge.
True.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to go false. Noah Vedral. True or false? Cratch.
True.
Sarge.
False.
Okay. I'm going to go true on that one too. The last one was Nick Crimmin, which I like that one. Sarge put that one on the list. You can make a case that some of those guys are offensive line. You could make a case. But I guess we all answer false on that. All right. Good times. Good. We want to address any of this, any of these?
Well, why take both of you, I guess? Why take the layup that is Noah Vedral? Is it the backup quarterback competent? Because 03 is clearly, and Bo Melton has a case too, but 03, 100 tackles, defense. I mean,
yeah, I guess I'm just expecting 03 to be great again. I don't know. I mean, Vedral's kind of.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's the most valuable player. He's the most important player.
Okay, well, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, I just think Noah Vedral has to be a step better than he was last year for the team to be better. I guess that's what I was thinking, or stay healthy.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I think a lot of the offensive growth is being pinned on Vedral being better with a full off season, with training camp, with spring practice, because the offensive line should be about the same or a little bit better, but it's not going to make any big strides. Same with the skill position players. But I think Vedral, he's got to be better. He's got to stay healthy. Look, you can't fault the kid for being the victim of a cheap shot in the Maryland game, but he missed the Purdue game because of a shoulder injury. He was dinged up in some other games. He got dinged up and got knocked out of a game at Nebraska the year before he came to Rutgers. So he's going to run a lot. He's going to take hits. Durability, I think, has to be somewhat of a concern for him. So I think he's the most important player because he needs to be better. He needs to stay on the field. And if he doesn't, there's not much proven production behind him.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think you risk really overexposing Johnny Langan again.
Right, and then those they look like the two kids behind him are talented, but until you see them in games, there's just a lot of questions there. So he has to stay healthy and he has to be better. All right, let's dive into the Rutgers Insider questions. As always, NJ.com/insider to subscribe. I want to thank all of you for staying with us during the dog days of summer. I know it's not as active as it might be during the fall, but we are still digging for nuggets and news, and been glad to have you as part of our service. All right, let's start with this one. We have a great recruiting class. Thanks from Diane, who's one of our favorites. We have a great recruiting class for 2022, but doesn't this put a tremendous amount of pressure on the team for the fall season to do well? I would imagine that many will walk away if we have a bad season, right? Or are early commits, quote unquote, under contract regardless. This is a good point, and I wondered about this. Like, I do think Diane's right, that there's pressure on this team to at least do better than it did last year to show that the momentum's going in the right year. I think the number that has to scare them is 3, right? If they win 3 games again, then people are going to say, "Oh, geez, this is what they did. This is the same thing they did last year." What do you think, Cratch? I mean, does it put more pressure on this season because of the recruiting success?
Yes and no. I think I agree with you. Like, I think this team has to win 4 games to kind of feel good and keep the ship moving. With that being said, I don't necessarily think that unless they completely bottom out and go 1-11 or 0-12 or something, I don't think that's necessarily going to change the recruiting success, just because it's not like they got these guys committed off of a 8-4 season that with a bowl win. They were 3-6 in a COVID year anyway, and they got these guys committed. So I think there's a little bit more to this than strictly on-field results. But I agree with you. I do think they have to at least – they might not get to a bowl game this year. I don't think they're going to get to a bowl game this year. But they've got to at least show a little bit of progress to keep everything moving.
How do you feel, Sarge? You agree?
Greg Schiano, way back in the day, he probably did it to you, but he would always talk about the key, the program building is keeping it on the upward, making sure that they're always going up. Yeah. And I don't think is it the end all be all if they have a step back. I don't know. I think they're going to need to show progress, and whatever that progress is, it probably, I don't think 4 wins is good enough, to be honest with you. When you have, as many players back on the 2 deep as they have, I think that, potentially, at least getting in contention for a bowl game. Like if they're, when the calendar turns to November, if they're not in contention for bowl game, I think that's a disappointment.
Yeah, I will say that is a key thing for me, though. You're right. I mean, to be in at least in the conversation at the 4 or 5 win mark, where there's, hey, look, well, there's if they pull an upset here, they can still get there. I think that's really important for the momentum. But will it be a deal breaker for the program's direction? I don't think so. He's remember, you mentioned this, but he survived some dips. It wasn't like the first go around was just this steady climb. I mean,
Yeah, but recruiting back then, recruiting was awful in those first few years. When you look back, not only, were the rankings, but the rankings actually did live up to, the billing for as low as they were. He had some really bad recruiting classes, coming off those years. It wasn't really until 2005, 2006 when they started showing progress, is when he was able to actually do well in the state and turn his recruiting around. So, I look, I mean, it would be 1 year, and I just think that he needs to show progress. I think you need to keep it, keep the momentum going, both on the recruiting trail and on the field.
All right, good question, Diane. And I love questions like this from Chris Monty in Toronto, where you've got a choice of disasters. Rutgers athletics is clearly on the upswing. However, which outcome would be a bigger setback to that momentum in 2021? The aforementioned football goes 3-9, or men's basketball goes 500 and does not make the NCAAs. Cratch, what do you think?
Probably football 3-9. If Chris had said if basketball finishes with a losing record, I would actually say it's that, just because I think that you're still kind of building a consistent passion and following with that program after 30 years in the woods. But I'll say 3-9 for football. Sarge, I think, disagrees with me.
You disagree, Sarge?
I think, again, whatever you want to say about 2 years ago NCAA tournament, but like getting the NCAA tournament for the first time in 30 years would buy him, if there is some sort of dip, that would buy him, a waiver on that. I mean, come on. Come on.
But wait, but waivers on that. Greg Schiano's got a lifetime waiver.
No, I'm not. But Sarge, I'm not talking about Peichel. I'm not saying Peichel's on the hot seat. What I'm saying is that
there are no hot seats in Piscataway right now. It's like, for God's sake.
Actually, I don't think there are any hot seats.
No, it's a lot. That's the coldest.
Incredible.
It's a frigid. The seat, the frigid cold. Yes.
The hottest seat is like this one we make up on the podcast. No, my point, I guess, is that I feel like Rutgers fans are a little bit more demanding and healthily. It's healthy. So at this point, I mean, they got this big, beautiful state-of-the-art practice facility. They went big game hunting and they came away with Schiano. I think there's more of a swagger, and I just think, I'm not saying it would have been immediate or, of course, Peichel's, he's going to be here as long as he wants to be here, of course, at this point. But I do think that you would, I think my point was you go from having 8,000 in the rack every night to like we got 7,000 in the rack every night, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the football, the unspoken question about the 3-9, 3-9, I think is really going to be that's going to be a bad number for Rutgers. But is it 3-9? Is it 3-9 when you're losing 78 to nothing to Michigan? I mean, that there's degrees of 3-9. We're 3-9 when you lose to Delaware. I mean, there's different things that can happen that could be a disaster beyond just having a season that's not up to expectations. All right, let's get another one from Jeff Steer. Wants to ask, he directs it directly to Kratch, of course, because Kratch is the expert on stuff like this. Do you have a sense of any freshman who could come in and contribute right away in football? Kratch, who do we got? What names are you looking at?
That's a great question, Jeff. I'm going to pull up the roster as we speak. This is really good radio, so if you guys want to make some Francesa noise over or something.
Over under win, loss, win.
At Jacksonville. That's a loss. You got it, Kratch? Or should we move on to?
No, I got it. All right, so I obviously you get some guys banged up in a spring practice, but I think Elijah Clark from Camden, we talked about their secondary. I think there's some depth issues there. Kyrie Baton, linebacker could contribute. Obviously, I think Jordan Thompson and Ryan, Keeler are two bigger guys that I think have a chance to see the field pretty early on the defensive line. Todrick's very high on Shaquan Loyal. He wrote a big feature about it a couple months ago.
That's right.
Many fans remember. So, yeah, but I think at this point, too, with so many veteran guys coming back, this is a type of season where it's great if a freshman or two stands up and stars and surprises you. But for the most part, you can afford to let these guys naturally just kind of get their feet under them and even redshirt and move forward into the future.
It'd be a good developmental year to not have a lot of freshmen play. It's a very good point. All right. So another question here, Sarge. I want to take this one. Fran Brown's reputation has greatly grown as an elite recruiter. Indeed, that's very true. It's only a matter of time before other schools come calling, particularly Temple. It would be quite a blow. But who is on the short list as potential replacements? I know it's not easy to think that way about recruiting. But just what do you think about the job Fran Brown's done? And do you think he's going to be a guy who you might lose in a year?
Yeah. I mean,
at least they're paying him. What are they paying him now? He's got a nice.
They are paying him, but I mean, he's the ideal candidate for Temple. If and when. And Kratch has already fired Rod Carey like 3 or 4 times. I think that in print. So.
Wait until Rutgers destroys them in that game too. It's gonna be another. That's gonna be.
He is not talking to NJ.com after in that post game. Their coaches read everything, and Kratch has already put him on the hot seat. So, but yeah, Fran Brown is obviously going to be the I can't really think. No one else really comes to mind as far as candidates. I mean, I think he's going to be the guy as far as potential. I can't even off the top of my head.
What about Taekwon Underwood right on the staff?
That's the thing. Like I was talking to a coach, and they were like, "Oh, well, this guy on the Rutgers staff," and like literally half the Rutgers staff, I think, wants the Temple job when it comes open. It's they're like, oh, yeah. I'm serious. Like Fran,
why would you want that job? Come on.
Because it's right there. It's Temple. I think there's a belief. Man. I mean, look, Al Golden, Matt Rule, Jeff Collins, they all recruited. Okay. They all won. Then they went away, and it's not Temple's fault. They hired Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz probably would have done a great job at Temple too and continue right down the line. But he bolts to Miami, and they in my opinion, made an ill-advised hire. I think Rod Carey's a good football coach.
Oh,
but
here we go.
This poor guy. This poor man.
Rod Carey.
Good grief.
They hired a guy with no ties, and then he had built a staff that doesn't have a lot of ties to the area.
Rod Carey.
But if you look at Rutgers staff, Underwood, Brown, Sean Gleason, Nunzio, all these guys that can recruit the Northeast. So I think it'll be like a honestly, Temple should just drive up to like the Hyatt in New Brunswick and just run half the interviews out of the conference room.
Another guy who Temple is going to kick the tires on is Casey Keeler. I mean, a guy, who had a lot of success in South Jersey. He's obviously coming off a national championship. Casey Keeler is going to be a guy and who Crouch and I both know, has tried to get, back home.
He did not hide his interest in the Rutgers.
No, he did not. So, there were people, in his camp that were certainly, saying, is there any way you can, maybe put in a good word for Casey, but he's another guy that Temple, I'm sure will kick the tires on.
Put everything in Cratch's life on the scale of from 1 being Rod Carew to 10 being, I can't even say it, but blanking at his name, the freaking Army coach. Rod Carey. I'm sorry, Rod Carey. And who's the
Rod Carew?
Did I say Rod Carew? Oh boy, I'm just mangling this joke. It was a good. I can't think.
It's good though. No, it was a good one.
What's the Army's coach's name? I'm
Jeff Munkin.
Jeff Munkin. So 1 being Rod Carey, 10 being Jeff Munkin. You just want to fall somewhere on that scale, closer to Jeff than to that's all you want to do with Cratch.
Absolutely.
Let's see what other questions we have. Rutgers had a strong 2014 recruiting class under Kyle Flood, which completely fell apart after many decommitments, as we talked about a lot, after a rough 2013 in the field. What is Rutgers doing differently to prevent the same thing from happening again? I'll start with the obvious point that Kyle Flood is not the head coach. Cratch, you want to add anything else? Sorry.
I'll add the second obvious point. The AD will not be passing the hat in the Audi Club to try to fire the head coach.
Yeah, that's a good observation too. It's just a different. I mean, they've got their stuff together. It's a different thing. I would be absolutely stunned if that happened. I wouldn't be stunned if they lost a player. I mean, look, some of these kids, all right, suddenly Notre Dame's there and they got a full ride, and it's a different deal. It's a different level. That's going to happen. But Sarge, I just do not see that happening for the class falling apart.
No. I don't even really want to talk about it because I just think that we're wasting energy talking. I just think that Greg Schiano has figured it out from a recruiting standpoint. He's a guy who once. Look, I mean, there were some Florida kids back in the day. I don't know if it's still the case, but there were Florida kids back in the day that you never knew because once Rutgers would get a commitment from, that would lead to like all the Florida schools, sending out offers, and then all of a sudden, Greg Schiano would have to get on a plane, get on a jet to go visit Antoine Lowry or someone like that, in order to secure the commitment, which was a complete time suck for Greg Schiano. Yeah. Will that happen? Well, could I see the scenario come November where all of a sudden, a kid from, Pennsylvania, then Greg has to hop on a helicopter? Perhaps. But, Greg Schiano's shown a willingness to do that. And I think, again, his staff, he has a good staff, and I just don't think that's going to happen.
And keep in mind, a lot of these players already have those offers from Wimsack could have picked Notre Dame. He could have picked Kentucky already if he wanted to stay at home. It's not the situation where, Saquon Barkley, he picked Rutgers. I don't remember if he had did he have the offer at the time from Penn State, or did Franklin come in and I don't remember exactly what happened.
Yeah, no, he didn't have the offer.
Right. This was the different situation where Rutgers identified that kid before he blew up as the recruit, the star that he was. So, it really is a different situation. I think Greg Schiano is kind of letting them know that this is year 2 in a multiple year rebuild, and I think he's probably letting them know that you're bracing them for the possibility of a 4-8 or even a 3-9, like we've talked about. I think Greg Schiano's trying to be as honest as possible as far as this is year 2. That last year was a weird year, and they showed some progress.
but ultimately, they didn't win as many games as they would have liked to, and I think that year two, I think he's trying to brace for the worst case scenario.
All right, one more I got for you. This is from Peter in Palm City. I don't know where Palm City is, but it sounds pretty. All right, COVID. Schiano debut in person, regional opponent Thursday night. What is your crowd estimate for the opener? Let's do some numbers here. What do you got, Sarge? You go first.
Oh, man. People are not going to like this, but only because, look, I mean, Yankee games aren't really selling out at, I know they did okay this past weekend with the Red Sox, but they're not, like, fans are not coming back to the ballpark in droves, as much as a lot of people thought they would. So there is still some, apprehension. You couple that with a Thursday night.
Right. Poor opponent.
Yeah. How many in the building, or what they announce? I think they'll announce over 40.
Yeah.
I think in the building.
They will announce over 40.
Yeah, I think in the building 35,000.
Yeah, that seems like a right number. You going over or under, Cratch?
I don't think they're going to get to 52,414. I think that's the number we've written a lot with all these COVID crowd capacity stories. I think they're going to get close. Because here's why. Because I think that the team you have at Rutgers now is going to know all the ins and outs, and they're going to do things that maybe Rutgers has not done in the past. Like to the point where they would like if they think they're close, they're going to have interns walking around New Brunswick
on true.
Thursday morning handing people tickets.
Yeah, K-Mac's going to fly. Kevin McCollum's going to fly a turbojet over the Piscataway area, dropping them to me.
And having it by Thursday, so now it's right before the holiday weekend. They're going to get every high school football team, every youth football team. Like the Brick City Lions, the entire program is going to be there. Yep. That they're going to do stuff like that. They're going to get butts in the seats. I don't know if my prediction is there's enough people there that they can announce a sellout.
Wow. I think that is we're going to be snickering. I don't think they're going to, if they do that, it's going to be, they have to get close enough so it at least looks like a sellout, though. I mean, they got to get, I think they're going to get over 45,000 people. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see what you see.
Bold prediction.
Right.
I'm putting my faith in you, K-Mac.
I'm going to go closer to SARS than your prediction, Cratch, but that's going to be fun to watch. And we'll be there in the stadium. It's so exciting for people to get back to things the way they should be. That's all I got on my thing, guys. Get anything else? Last thoughts before we sign off?
No, Indy. I mean, we getting back to normalcy, and Crash could probably speak to this better, but like the we're actually going to see Greg Schiano. We're actually going to interview him in person for the first time. Since
we're going to actually see Noah Vedral in person for the first time.
First time ever, right?
Noah Vedral.
Yes.
Noah, nice to meet you.
Right.
Yes.
Nice to you could say, Noah, nice to Vedral. Nice to meet you. I was pushing for the other quarterback all last season. No, you shouldn't start. I was a big art guy. And Sarge, you can say, like, here, can we play a snippet? You were a Vedral guy.
I will bring the recorder. Yep.
Bring the recorder for him. Just so you know, we both stand here if you're going to be nice to one of the two people on the podcast.
Yep. Yeah. I was a Vedral guy for the record.
There's no.
My bylines and my bylines speak to it.
So I think it's actually going to be on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Oh, really? Okay.
Which is kind of interesting. It's like I have been to Indianapolis several times for big Rutgers, Indiana, NFL Combine, and I've been inside the stadium, but I've never actually been in the stadium because at the Combine they don't let you actually in. So it'll be my first time actually physically in Lucas Oil Stadium, the arena part of it. I'm intrigued to see how it goes. How many people are there. The Big Ten has kind of made it sound like it's going to be like 2019, all over again for the most part. So it'll be very. I
don't know if it'll be hovering over the tables. I think they'll probably put the coaches at a podium. I think they'll put the players at a podium. I don't know if we'll get one-on-ones with the players quite yet, but I think it'll be as normal as possible.
I think so. I know they got the breakout sessions, so I just get like Jim Harbaugh, a freaking pandemic and everything. He comes back to just have people ask him, why can't you beat Ohio State? Why do you suck so much when you go back to the NFL? He must have loved that.
What's the number one from a Big Ten standpoint? What's the number one non-Rutgers story, Crash? What's the number one storyline that you're going to be pursuing?
I think I'll give a couple of them because I can't really put them in order. I think one is, can Ohio State? This is kind of a big test for them, and it's year 3, so like it's not Urban's team anymore. It's Ryan Day's team. It's all of his guys, and I think we all think that they're going to keep chugging along, but can they? I think out west, I'm going to write this later in the week on NJ.com. I think Wisconsin is a sneaky playoff contender because their schedule, where they avoid Ohio State in the regular season, they play Notre Dame, they play Army, they get Iowa at home, they could easily be undefeated going in that title game. And if Ohio State's undefeated, the Big Ten could get both of them in the playoff potentially if everything breaks out. I think Nebraska's a huge storyline, and I think they were talking about this on Yahoo. I think it would be the biggest buyout in the history of college football to get Scott Frost to go away. But at this point, like if he can't go to a bowl game in year 4, are you going to keep him around? I think Harbaugh is a huge storyline. And for me, a sneaky one is Maryland has recruited really well, not just under Loxley, but even with DJ Durkin before him. At what point are they actually going to win games with all these recruits they've brought in?
It's a great
I think that's a big question for me. I look at their schedule. I think they're like a 2 or 3 win team just because they're non-conference and everything. But at some point, like Maryland, we have to stop talking about Maryland. Oh, look at this. They're top 30 recruiting class. They've been that for like almost a decade now, and they've done nothing with it.
Great stuff, guys. I look forward to following your coverage there. We will be back with a podcast before training camp, perhaps, to talk about the upcoming camp. Until then, thanks for listening as always, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.
You haven't heard enough from me yet, huh? Steve Politi here for one last thank you to this episode's sponsor, New Brunswick Development Corporation, and to listeners like you who make it all the way to the end of the show. We'll see you again soon.